Well, it's good to be back. I'm sorry that it's taken so long to get the second or third episode up on the YouTube channel, but actually I made the mistake of working on two episodes at once and got a little bogged down, and I'm going to have to put off what I was going to do at the start of this third episode onto another time, but waiting for some permissions to come through for some copyrighted material. So I decided to jump in this time with the Union Pacific Station project, and just to talk about it a little bit, this is a kit. The Union Pacific Station is a kit made by these people, American Model Builders, and this is the first kit that I built of American Model Builders, and it was really a fun kit to build. It took about 40 hours to build, and it's not a kit for beginners. At the very least, it requires intermediate model building skills, maybe a little bit more advanced than intermediate. But as you can see on the close-up pictures here, it builds into a really nice model. And there's a lot of parts to it, and the only way to go through it is to take your time very carefully, and they send you quite comprehensive instructions that I'll show when I open up the Union Pacific kit. But this one model that I built was, I kind of took some liberties on it and named it for a friend in Britain who's another railroad enthusiast, and it's going to feature in a small town setting on my future layout as a general mercantile and camping supply store. The original model is actually based on a real place, as are all their models. This is the Ellington Mercantile Store in Georgia. I believe it's Ellington, Georgia. And so it's based on actual measurements of a real place and exact model of it. And they're interesting kits in that they're designed to go together with tab and slot construction and self-adhesive. They say you don't need any adhesive to build this. It's all self-adhesive, but you do need some. But they're really fun to build. They're challenging to build, and as I said, they build up really nicely. The interesting thing is the parts are all made out of a very, very thin model grade plywood, about a 32nd of an inch in thickness, and some of it a lot thinner than that. And the parts are all laser cut, so they're very, very precise. Everything goes together exactly where it's supposed to go and is exactly the right size. So if you've got reasonably good model building skills, I really would encourage you to try one of these. They're a lot of fun. One word of advice though, it's best to do most of the painting before you start popping the parts out of their sheets. And I learned the hard way with the Ellington kit, make your first coat of paint not with a water-based or acrylic paint, because it is plywood and it will warp, and you can take this warp out of it. So on the Union Pacific kit, I'll show you what I did to overcome that. But with that, we'll take a moment here and we'll start going through the Union Pacific kit. Okay, this is the Union Pacific Depot kit by American Model Builders. You can see here it says laser kit. A number of manufacturers now are making what we call laser kits. They use much the same technology, but I think American Model Builders was the first in this. This kit I don't believe is any longer in production. I got it about 10 years ago and put it on the shelf with a promise to myself that I would build it one day, and it looks like that day is here. And so I'm really looking forward to doing this. A little bit about the building itself. It says Union Pacific Standard 24-foot by 64-foot depot. Like a lot of the major railroads, Union Pacific relied on very standard designs for things, almost like a design cookbook. And this, for their branch lines and secondary lines, these wood depots were very standard. They started building them actually in the very early 1900s. And quite a number of them are still in use today, not for passengers or for freight. They're basically used now on their lines as staging bases for maintenance crews and stuff. So quite a few of them are still in existence. And they're just a very attractive structure. They've got a very nice balanced look to their architecture. As it says, this is a 24 by 64 foot depot. And in terms of the depots, this was probably the middle size. They had 24 by 80 foot, which had a longer passenger section or freight section down here. And then they also had some, believe it, that were 24 by 48 foot, or in that range. And they're pretty interesting. There was an article in this magazine. I'm a member of the Union Pacific Historical Society, and the Streamliner is their magazine, and this issue Volume 3, Number 2, several years ago, featured an article all about these depots. And the gentleman that wrote the article did a very good research on the design. This is the 24 by 50, the smaller depot. Oh yeah, and there was a 20 by 40, the smallest. And Terry Metcalf did a very well-researched story about this. And you can see in here, here's the 24 by 64, this same model. And I also learned some other information that I'll relate from this. But let's look at the kit first. As you open the kit, you will see, first of all, and this is really important, that American Model Builders provides a very, very expansive instruction sheet. Book, actually. It's a booklet. And they tell you all about the structure and its history. And as I was saying, the book provides a lot of information about the history of the buildings on all their kits. And it's really kind of an interesting read right there. But you can see here, well, the first things they give you in here is all these sheets. They have parts layouts on those sheets of plywood. And this is a very crucial thing. And here's more. You can see all the parts here. This is all the parts layout. And then they step you through, one step at a time, identifying the part by sheet, letter, and number of the part. And they tell you what to put where. And I strongly advise you follow their instructions exactly. They've thought this out very well, and they take you through sequentially. And this goes on for about 8-9 pages, and just work your way through it. I imagine this kit's going to take me a little longer than the other one, although I'll be able to do some steps faster because now I've got more experience with it. So we get into the kits and actually looking at it themselves. They're well packed. And this is what the parts look like. This is not exactly the way they look when they come out of the box. You've basically got two kinds here. This is the thicker plywood, which is used for a lot of the main structural members, and this is very, very thin plywood, and you can see very thin by looking at that. It's hardly thicker than a sheet of cardstock. This is about a 1/16 of an inch thick. And this plywood is actually, it is plywood colored. I mean, it looks like plywood. What I've already done here is I've sprayed it first with a can of Rust-Oleum gray automotive primer to seal it. And then, since the bulk of the station's color is actually white, I used Rust-Oleum $2.49 a can white paint, spray paint on this, and that's really handy. You can get it at Home Depot, and it's the right color you need. And so this has been sealed, and now we don't have any warping because these are not water-based paints. And so I learned that trick the first time around. And I've done all these parts, and you can see, I'll just take a few more out here. You can see how many they give you. Put this tissue up here. There's more windows. This is various trim pieces. These are all the little roof supports that all go in there. And one of the things, when you work with the thinner materials, these actually are plywood that has had an adhesive on the back, and they're on a backing sheet here. And the way you use these, and you can see the laser cut lines all the way through the backing sheet, is you carefully take these out of the sheet and then peel the backing off. And then these are like detail pieces for windows and doors. These will go on other parts, and their adhesive is already on there, so you don't need to worry about gluing anything down. And you can see there's quite a bit in here. This is end wall pieces for the actual structure, the siding pieces. There's all kinds of lower portions of the wall. There's several hundred pieces to this kit. One of the things that was challenging about this, and I go back to this article from Streamliner, is that the Union Pacific through the years used a number of paint schemes for their structures, for their depots. And in the early 1960s, they introduced this paint scheme. And it's white and green, and that's the paint scheme I'm going to paint mine as, or build mine as. Quite a number of these stations still exist in this paint scheme, so it'll be very common to find one in the 1985-1995 period that I'm modeling that looks like this. The challenge was the particular color of green, and you can't see it here very well, but when you look at a picture of these stations, this green has a very, very slight bluish cast to it. And I was having a very hard time matching it with any commercially available paint. But then the article in Streamliner gave me a clue where Terry Metcalf writes in here that the color was something called Kentucky Green, okay, that they actually used on here. And he gave me a bit of information that I was able to use to find the paint. It's Kentucky Green PMS 349. PMS stands for the Pantone Matching System. Now, because I've got some background in printing, I happen to know exactly what that is. That's a color matching system used by printers. I also know that there are applications online to go from Pantone Matching System to Hex System for color coding to CMYK, which is cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And you can, when you find the PMS number, you can then go into these applications and find out exactly how to mix up the color yourself. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. And I'm going to use these paints right here. These are acrylics. Okay. And you notice something. They all say primary magenta, primary yellow, primary cyan, and black. Okay, the CMYK system is based on these four colors in varying proportions. And so there's C cyan, M magenta, Y yellow, and they use K for black. And I was able to decipher exactly the CMYK proportions of these paints, and then I'll be able to mix up the paint using those proportions in a small medicine syringe that you use for children's medicine to measure out the exact amount, put the amounts in a jar and put it in my paint shaker, and I will have Kentucky Green. And that's the next step I'm going to do, hopefully this week. So when I come back next week, hopefully you will see the CMYK result on the model, and I'll have some of the model built. Until then, and hopefully I'll get that other episode ironed out, we'll see you in a week. Bye.